Okay, Ji, today we are going to discuss what is meant by level of analysis in international relations. And it is often heard that application of an IR theory for that purpose, you must have a sound knowledge about level of analysis. It is quite right. First, we will discuss about the level of analysis. Then we will debate that level of analysis in international relations cannot work in isolation. Definitely, you need certain perspectives, certain theories. Within the domain of those perspectives and theories, level of analysis would work. They can't work in isolation or independently. But what really is meant by level of analysis? We can say that level of analysis, it basically provides us a direction from which different causes come. Now there are different causes, directions. So it means level of analysis is not a single entity, a single thing. Normally, if we read international relation books, so you would come across three level of analysis, along with the fourth one as well. We will firstly try to explain all these level of analysis, and then you will automatically come across that these level of analysis cannot work in isolation. For instance, first we'll discuss about these level of analysis and the 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 main motive or the purpose of introducing level of analysis. We have cleared it, that it tells us, or it provides us the direction from which different causes are coming to us. For instance, if there is a question, causes of World War One, so level of analysis would provide different directions to understand World War One. It will provide us then different causes as well. So, what type of level of analysis are there in international relations? The first and the foremost one is individual level. In few books, you would also come across the word decision making level. It's the same thing, individual level or decision making. Now, this level of analysis, it emphasizes its focus, it tells us about the leaders, how they are thinking, it tells us about different decision making institutions, that how they are thinking, how they what type of path they have chosen, and of course that is within a state. So this is one. Now, what that leadership is thinking, is it thinking in context of power, or it is thinking in terms of negotiations, interactions, or is it the leadership is thinking in terms of ideas? We are not clear about it. But one thing we are clear about it, that at the individual level, or the decision making level, we will going to study leaders or the decision making institutions. We are not clear about this thing that how they are thinking. For that purpose, we need something else. That's why I initially said that level of analysis cannot work in isolation. We will come to it, but after having an understanding of what types of level of analysis are there in international relations. The one is individual level. At the individual level, you would emphasize or discuss or research on leaders and the decision making institutions. That's one thing. Second, the second one, most common word which is used is the domestic level. Domestic level. At the domestic level, you will going to focus on the internal characteristics of a country or countries. So these internal characteristics may be economic, may be political, etc. But you will going to focus on the internal characteristics of a country or countries. This is the second uh, level of analysis. But again, what are those internal characteristics? Are they driven by the idea of power or interdependence, or there are certain ideas or identities? We don't know. But one thing is clear that at the domestic level, you will going to study the internal characteristics of that particular country, that how that internal characteristics is shaping its foreign policy, its other decision makings. So that's the second level of analysis, domestic level. In the individual level, you are going to study leaders and their institutions. At the domestic level, the characteristics, internal characteristics of a country or countries. At number three, the most common word which is used is systemic level. Now, the systemic level of analysis, it emphasizes that how, sorry, that how countries are positioned in the world. That's very important. What are their intentions? Their Are they operating in context of any relative power gain, or they want to interact unilaterally, or they believe in multilateral context? All these things are dependent upon that how those countries are positioned in the world. United States, China, Rwanda, Brazil, India, their positioning in the world would determine their course of action. But is their course of action they are pursuing for power, or their course of actions are pertaining to they want trade and peace at the global level? or they want something else in terms of any ideology, what they want. We are not clear about these things, but we are clear that at the systemic level, it's the relative position, sorry, of that particular state in the world that derives that state to come up with a, a position, a decision. So these are the three major level of analysis: individual, domestic, systemic, and then there is a fourth one as well, which is commonly known as foreign policy level of analysis. Now, this foreign policy level of analysis, it's, you can say that it links your domestic politics and international relations. For instance, is it possible that leaders across the globe, they try to use foreign policy, specifically you can say wars, they use war to get re-elected, to get any domestic support, or to say remain in power? If not a leader, then a political party. See? So this is the fourth one. Now, any discerning mind can easily understand that we cannot, one cannot apply these levels in isolation. It won't work. It can never work. You need perspectives. In few books, you would come across the word definitely theories. It is only through the prism of theories or perspectives that level of analysis can work. Level of analysis can't work independently in isolation. In international relations, there are four agreed upon perspectives, four perspectives, theories, you can say, and these four perspectives: realist, liberal, constructivist, and critical theory. Largely, you would come across that scholars of international relations, they work within the domain of realism, liberalism, or constructivism, except a few in critical theory. So, level of analysis would work in each and every perspective. Now, a perspective or a theory, that's very important. A perspective or a theory, it helps us to decide what are the primary causes of an event. Causation doesn't come from level of analysis only. Causations comes out of the theory. So any level of analysis, the interpretation can be different. For a realist perspective, individual level will provide you a different analysis. And on the same event, if you would apply a liberal perspective, here individual level would come up with a different analysis. So things are not in black and white, that whatever you have concluded in individual level through the perspective of realism, so that's it. Okay. Now no other perspective or the interpretation can be applied. No, it's wrong. On a single event, the realist perspective would provide you a different analysis at the individual level. Liberal perspective would provide you a different. Same goes to constructivism and critical theory as well. As far as realist perspective is concerned, in realist perspective, in most of the cases, you would come across that it's the struggle for power as the most important reason or causation behind any development. Whatever has been happening across the globe, the most important motive is struggle for power. And now they would view this struggle for power at the systemic level. They would view the same struggle for power at the domestic level, and they would view the same struggle for power at the individual level. Secondly, liberals. Well, liberals argue that interactions, dialogue, interdependence, institutions are important. So they would apply these interactions, institutions, and their working at the systemic level. They would apply the same at the domestic level. They would apply the same at the individual level. So the analysis you would get from liberal perspective overall may be different from the analysis you are gaining from realist perspective. These may be different. It comes up with conclusions like ABC, it comes up with conclusions like XYZ, but both are correct. One cannot say that only the realist perspective is correct and this perspective is wrong. No, both the perspectives offers different analysis, and this is the beauty of international relations. It's one of the most flexible discipline. There are different approaches through which you can understand that what is going on across the globe. Same context can be applied on constructivism. Now, constructivism says that ideas are important, identities are important. So they would view these ideas and identities, how these ideas and identities are shaping at the global level and its impact. Same at the domestic level, same at the individual level. They may come up with another genre of analysis. So you cannot say that the first two are completely wrong, incorrect, and this one is correct. All are okay, all are correct. So level of analysis cannot work in isolation. You need certain perspectives, and through the prism of those perspectives, you try to understand uh, international relations or happenings across the globe. We'll also try to apply it on one development, and then it's up to you to exercise more and more. Now, before proceeding further, let us make a chart so that we can understand it more effectively. Of course, there are level of analysis. level of analysis. What type of level of analysis? We once see that it's systemic. Yes, at the systemic level, we have already discussed that it's the position of a country, position of a country versus other country. That's it. And of course, how they are interacting with each other through that positioning. The second level of analysis, which we have discussed, of course, that is domestic level. At the domestic level, you would focus on internal characteristics. Yes. At the third level, it is individual level. At the individual level, you are going to focus on leaders or the decision making institutions. And the fourth, that is foreign policy level. And at the foreign policy level, you would try to link domestic and, of course, your systemic concerns. Now, you cannot analyze, let's say, Syrian crisis at the systemic level or domestic level, individual level. You need a line, a direction, and that direction will be provided by perspectives. For an easy understanding, you can say that direction would be provided by the theories, largely, sorry, as we have discussed, these are three theories: realist perspective, liberal perspective, constructivist perspective, and of course, in some cases, it's critical theory as well. Now, we know this thing that at the systemic level, realists, they would definitely see that there is anarchy in system. There is a struggle for power. States want balance of power for peace at the global level. The liberals, they view that if states would work in international organizations, if they would negotiate with each other, issues can be resolved. Constructivists believe that whatever is happening across the globe, either in some cases you would see shared ideas between like minded countries, or you would see conflicting ideas between opponent states. So, this is how systemic level of analysis has been is working, and the direction is provided by perspective. So all three analyses which have been we have written here are correct. It's a flexible approach. At the domestic level, since realists, they believe that power is important, struggle for power is important. So at the domestic level, the internal characteristic of a state, that state is aggressive or not. And definitely it's aggressive states, and their internal characteristics, that how they are turned into an aggressive state. Their study would lead us to certain conclusions. For instance, if a war has started, so we will definitely see that what was the internal characteristics of that state. Liberals at the domestic level, They would see institutions, but institutions of a country, institutions within a country. Institutions are undemocratic, institutions are democratic, institutions are inclusive, institutions are exclusive. So liberals would view this. And the constructivists would see at the domestic level the political ideology of that country, the political ideology within the country. They would view it. So let's say we are trying to understand causes of a war. So realists would see the internal characteristics of that state overall that provided aggression. Liberals would see the role of institutions, the more undemocratic nature of institutions within a state, more chances of war. The more the institutions are democratic, less the chances of war. And the constructivist would see that it is the political ideology within a country that's the main reason behind war. So, so this is that just like fascism in Germany, fascism in Italy, you know. So then the individual level. At the individual level, realists they see human nature, the lust in human nature for power is the most important reason for in order to understand developments. For liberals, it's the role of leaders, how leadership is thinking, that is important. And the constructivist believe leaders' own strategies, his own ideology at the individual level. So why we say that Hitler is responsible behind this? We are basically studying in between the liberal perspective and in between the constructivist perspective. And of course, the realist would say it is the lust for power on the part of Hitler. All three arguments are correct. You cannot say that this argument is not correct and this argument is correct. No, all are correct. And then the last one, foreign policy level. Realist perspective would give you the conclusion, as we have discussed earlier, that war is used to survive in office. Either it's a leader or it's a political party, they use war to survive in office. For instance, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. There was no important reason behind that invasion, but they internally he was getting weak and he provided a, a, a course of action, a sense of purpose for his people. So he used that to remain in office. Now, the liberals believe that leaders use diplomacy to alter their relations. So they use diplomacy among different domestic institutions. And for constructivists, leaders use ideological alignments. to strengthen their ideology, to strengthen or to weaken the opponent's ideology. Now you would see, and as far as critical theory is concerned, the critical theory is say that system is corrupt, incapable, we have to change it. Critical theory is an exception case. Largely, you would analyze things within these three perspectives and four level of analysis. Now, the question arises that, for instance, if we confront a question in paper, what were the reasons behind World War One? So, are we supposed to write it in this manner that realist perspective, realist perspective, we will say systemic, then few lines, then domestic, then few lines, then individual, then few lines. Then we will give another header of liberal perspective, same applies here, then constructivist, same applies here. That would turn into an essay. You don't have to to come up with these headers. There is no need. It's your sort of paperwork. It's your rough work. But when you will write it, the teacher or a person having understanding of international relations would judge it that you have written it keeping in view the level of analysis. So you don't need to write those headers. Now we will try to understand it through a case study. Let's say we'll take the same case study of what were the reasons behind World War One. World War One. Of course, we can't start straightforward with the systemic level because there are different variations. You need different perspectives, and through those perspectives, power, interactions, or identity, you have to work on all three. Power from the realists, interactions from the liberals, ideas from the constructivists. So let us start it, and you would automatically know that what's how to apply level of analysis. The myth of application of theory. There is no such separate study of application of theory. When you are studying a theory, you are automatically, when you are trying to understand it, you are automatically getting this particular understanding of level of analysis. So it's quite easy. But if you would work on it, something that it independent of theories, or it is an independent branch of international relations, this level of analysis, you would be back to one scare. You will be there from where you started. You will gain nothing. So let us now see the causes of World War One through different perspectives. First one from the realist perspective. From the realist perspective, since they believe that it's the nature, human nature, at the individual level. See, we'll start from here and go up. They see human nature as the reason. Now make sure that human nature, it may be lust of power or it may be weak. So you see that realists see that at the individual level, it is the weak rulership, the weak rulership of Austrian king, isolationist tendency of Russian king, and weak ruling of German king for World War One. So they were weak rulers. So it is they are responsible. If they were smart rulers, they may have come up with some logical conclusions. They may have concluded issues efficiently, effectively, but they were weak. Their nature, although it's not lust for power, but their nature was indecisive. They were quite weak. At the domestic level, we will see, we'll again come back to here and see at the domestic level internal characteristic. So we will definitely see the internal characteristic. Well, at the domestic level, we'll see that German generals, general, German bureaucracy, it has dominated politics in 1890s in the first decade of 20th century. So the internal structure of Germany was very undemocratic. There was a shift of power. The new generals and the bureaucrats, they were more expansionists. They believe in expansions, and their ideas of expansions like German naval program, like Berlin, Baghdad railway project, these ideas offended other major powers, their expansionist designs. So the internal characteristic of the German as a state is also a major reason behind World War One. Thirdly, at the systemic level, we would see, again, we'll come back to the chart, balance of power, anarchy. So we would see that states developed alliances, okay, and those alliances certainly created a rigidity in European affairs. Secondly, in addition to that, different countries believe that since it's anarchy, so we have to come up with their own solutions, and their solutions clashed with each other. It resulted into clash of interest. So this is the application of realist perspective through three different level of analysis. There are a lot of questions in the mind of students when they try to understand or read level of analysis. Of course, you are also thinking about some questions, but let me first complete it, and it would definitely address your a lot of concerns. Liberals, of course, at the liberal level, again, we will see individual level. For individual level, again, we'll come here. Liberals believe at the individual level that diplomacy to alter relations at the domestic level. So liberals see that Bismarck or some other individuals, they are more effective than other leaders, like the king of Germany. So whatever the the strategies and policies which have been constructed, crafted by Bismarck, later on collapsed, and Germans have no option to rectify those developments, those strategies, those options crafted by Bismarck. And when those policies failed, problems in within the German state arose. And those problems further intensified the issue when generals and bureaucracy dominated the German politics. So, see, the perspectives would not contradict each other, rather, they would complement each other. Secondly, at the domestic level, we'll again go back to the chart at the domestic level, institutions within the country. How can institutions within a country be responsible behind World War One? That is definitely it's important. Domestic issues, particularly in Ottoman Empire, domestic issues, particularly in Austria, they were getting weak, and their weaknesses was in a way invitation for others to invade, since their domestic institutions were not strong. If your domestic institutions are strong, they're democratic, they're working good, then nobody would try to intervene. But since you were weak, your institutions were undemocratic, so you are yourself calling for an intervention. So more your domestic institutions are powerful, they are working, they are democratic, more chances of avoiding the war is very much there. Then the systemic level. At the systemic level, we'll come again to the chart. Liberals see that international organizations or the negotiations are important. If you are working within this domain, you would get maximum benefits. If not, then things would get fishy and problematic. So let us see in this context. Yes, there was no such organization where states can come up and try to diffuse their issue. Although there was a semi organization like Concert of Europe, but that also collapsed. So, in the absence of those institutions, what states did, they tried to follow their own paths, and those paths were undemocratic and resultantly led to World War One. So, this is how the liberal perspective and the level of analysis would work through that liberal uh, perspective. Now we'll come towards the third important context, and that is constructivist. That how constructivists see World War One. Now again, we'll go towards the individual level. We'll go back to the chart. Individual level. Leader use ideology. In the World War, in the context of World War One, Mm, as such, there was no leader who was using ideology. But when if you apply it on World War II, definitely there were leaders who tried uh, to strengthen their own brand of ideology. But still, if there was no ideology, but still, we'll see that few leadership was emotionally unstable. They were emotionally unstable, like the Austrian king, like the German king. They were emotionally unstable. If they were emotionally stable, things would have been different. So, see, if my path to progress is one, two, three, and here is victory. So, it doesn't mean that if I am not on the victory stand, so it means that you can also analyze that this person is not on victory stand because he or she didn't fulfill or didn't take this course of action. Course of action to victory is one, two, three. Don't get fixed on it. You can also analyze not to be on victory is because you haven't followed one, two, three. It's the same thing. So if there is no political ideology on the part of leadership, it doesn't mean that constructivist idea at the individual level will not work. You will see it other way around. That emotionally unstable leadership is also responsible. Now, the second one, at the domestic level, again, we'll go to the chart. At the domestic level, you would see political ideology of that particular country. Now, political ideology of that particular country, what you see is overall a new branding of nationalisms within the states. It is often said that in World War One, it's not the states who fought, it's the nationalisms that fought. So that's very much important. UK, US, followers of liberal internationalism. Sorry. On the contrary, Germans, Austrians, they believed in imperialism, they believed in expansions. So this new branding of nationalism at the domestic level is also a reason. And then the systemic level would again go back to the chart. At the systemic level, shared ideas versus conflicting ideas. There in World War II, it's quite easy because you would come across the things like social Darwinism was dominant in Germany, and like-minded idea of supreme nation, if not race, supreme nation in Italy. But what about in World War One? When in World War One, you would come across as uh, it was highlighted by E.H. Carr for World War Two. Same can be applied on World War One. It's a struggle between the haves and have-nots. Shared ideas versus opposite ideas. Democracy is on one side and undemocratic forces on the other side. And thanks to the Russian Revolution of 1917, when they mm, uh, kept themselves they kept themselves in war, but in 1918 they opted to uh, refrain from any further wars with Germany or others. So French, UK, US, that bloc was then a pure democratic bloc, and the slogan eventually gained currency. That it's the war between the democratic forces versus the undemocratic forces. Now, this is how level of analysis work. Are we supposed to write every question through this domain? No, it's not like that. Soon we will going to discuss past papers, and from those past papers, the practice of those past papers would provide you that understanding that it is not necessary to apply all these level of analyses and perspectives in every question. No, unfortunately, few teachers and the students and those having relatively less knowledge of the discipline, they try to apply or they try to view all those things through the perspective of level of analysis. It's not the case, but largely in historical context, it's very much possible. And then it's the nature of the question which would tell us that either we have to apply a level of analysis or not. For instance, take the example of CPEC and energy crisis of Pakistan. There's a question related to this, that how CPEC projects would address the energy crisis of Pakistan. So is it an international relation question? First thing, yes, it's an international relation question. But are we supposed to apply level of analysis in this question as well? There is no need to do this. So it's all about practice. But if you would come across a question, strength and liabilities of world containment policy, are we supposed to answer this question through the level of analysis? Yes, definitely. How the realists would see the strengths and liabilities, how the liberals would see strength and liabilities, how the constructivists would see strength and liabilities. So it's about common sense. Inshallah, soon from the next week, we will start past paper discussion. And I'm hopeful that through those past paper discussions, you would understand it more effectively and efficiently. Thank you.